Hello and welcome. My name is Jennifer Adams, and I am the editor-in-chief for the Knowledge Hook Signature Leadership Series, and thrilled to welcome all of you here. About 15 months ago, three partners got together and decided that we should create an SEL Global Leadership Series, and thrilled today to be able to say that our topic will be female educator networks, and a great topic for just post Mother's Day in North America, and happy Mother's Day to all of you that are here with us. Our three partners, our first is Karanga, and Karanga is an organization that started about 2 years ago and is the Global Alliance for SEL and Life Skills. And our host and our two panelists are all members of Karanga. And we do important work around advocacy, creating a connected community, and implementation support, and creating cutting edge research. And welcome all of you to access that website. Our second partner is Salzburg Global Seminar, and they are an international nonprofit that emerged right after the Second World War. And it was an organization, a not-for-profit, that really decided to look at what current and future leaders need to have in order to network together and shape a better world. They have been doing incredible work. We have fellows from 180 countries around the world, and there is the website if you want to connect to the work that they're doing. Our third partner is a Canadian digital math company, Knowledge Hook, and they have created, and we have created, a thought leadership series that all of you are welcome to sign up for. It is at knowledgehook.com/leadership. It is a free platform and has lots of different resources there. Really excited to say that we have registrants from 8 Canadian provinces, from 19 US states, and from 21 countries. And we know that there are many countries that are suffering with the effects of the pandemic. And I'd like to do a quick shout out to India. Our thoughts are with you. We have many guests that are here from India today. And of course, our wonderful panelist, Jigyasa, is coming from India. And we know it's incredibly challenging in your country, and we are all with you right now. It is my honor to be able to introduce our host for today. Barbara Holzapfel is Vice President of Microsoft Education, and Barbara is an incredible female technology leader, and really proud to be a friend and colleague with her. She has been doing amazing work in technology for many years in the ed tech world as well, and really helping put her skills together to make sure that students and teachers and administrators have access to great resources through Microsoft. So welcome to Barbara. We have two panelists, Patricia Vazquez and Jigyasa Labroo. And Barbara, I'm going to hand it over to you so that we can get started.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jennifer, and hello and welcome to all our participants. I'm Barbara Holzapfel, Vice President Education at Microsoft. And thank you so much for joining us for this Knowledge Hook Signature Leadership Series Roundtable today. And as Jennifer said in her introduction, today's topic is the importance of social emotional learning and the emergence of female educator networks. So I'd like to thank Knowledge Hook, the Salzburg Global Seminar, and Karanga, the Global Alliance for SEL and Life Skills, for putting together this event and for inviting me to be part of it. As we all know, COVID has caused this past year to be a year of unprecedented change, complexity, and ambiguity for education systems, students, teachers, parents all around the world. And the pandemic has disrupted the education of more than 1.6 billion students around the world. And in a lot of cases has caused the convergence of three crises: a public health crisis, an economic crisis, and in many parts of the world, a humanitarian crisis. And according to UNESCO, the disruption has disproportionately affected girls and young women, particularly in low and middle income countries. And the most marginalized groups in that context are girls with disabilities, those in conflict affected areas, and those in remote and rural communities. And projections suggest that as schools return to in-person sessions, approximately 11 million girls, especially those aged 12 to 17, will not return to school. So this disruption has the potential to roll back some of the substantial gains that had been made for girls' education in the past decades. And the long-term effects of this loss of opportunity for girls and women will affect progress towards poverty reduction, health and well-being, inclusive quality of education, and overall gender equality. So this topic could not be more critical in this time. At the same time, all the learnings from this past year and how teachers and students and system leaders have all put their creativity to work and keeping students engaged in learning, the reimagining of education systems as we look beyond the current situation of the crisis and a possibility of moving back into the classrooms also gives a unique opportunity to ensure that the 128 million girls who are already out of school before the pandemic are included with school reopening plans, and that plans to ensure continuity of learning to support all students, including the most marginalized, are put in place for future crises and disruptions of education. Because that's one thing we have learned over this past 15 months is a disruption can come at any moment without any warning, and putting those learnings to work to be prepared and have flexible models that can include more learners is really critical as we move forward. The events of 2020 also showed us that social emotional learning is more important than ever before. And a recent survey conducted by YouGov indicated that 58% of teachers said that social emotional learning is of very high or high priority, an increase from 47% just the year earlier. So this topic is moving much more to the center of the conversation in education. And that's an important learning from the past year. The same study also revealed that some of the skills that actually help students navigate the stress, the disruption, and the ambiguity of the pandemic are the skills that they acquire and are related to social emotional learning, including attention control, the ability to work independently, similar skills that are actually going to be needed and are going to be critical in the workplace as we move forward. So in all of that context, it's never been more important for educators to work together to spread awareness of the challenges that girls face in gaining access to education and advocate for social and emotional learning that helps all students gain these critical skills and navigate their futures in a way that will work for them and that can help them lead a fulfilled life. In that context, cooperative networks of educators are instrumental for sharing best practices and the development of new ideas. And that has been an amazing thing to see as educators came together all around the world over these past 15 months to share and help each other move forward. And very specifically, female educator networks provide an opportunity for those who have been underrepresented to share their experiences, to have their voices heard, and to improve learning for all. So I am super excited that with us today, we have two incredible women and trailblazers who've been working to close the gaps in education. I'm looking forward to hearing their thoughts on inequities in education for girls and how specifically female educator networks are proving how they can play a role in reversing this trend. So please give a warm welcome of the virtual kind to Patricia Vazquez from Mexico City and Jigyasa Labroo from Delhi, India. And I understand that both Patricia and Jigyasa have prepared some short presentations about their work and what they've been doing and how they've been helping the education of girls around the world. So I'll first hand it over to Patricia. Please take it away.
Thanks a lot, Barbara. And it's so nice to be here with you, with Jen, with Jigyasa. Like, she's done an amazing job in India. And thanks also to everyone. Salzburg Global, Karanga, and all the members that have joined the conversation. So I'm just going to speak in the voice of this network of women in education, Barbara, and it's just going to be like a very short presentation so you have an idea of you and all the participants of what we're doing. So I'm part of this network of women in education. I'm part of the committee, of the executive committee, and it all started in 2019. And I think that it happened that the reason of what it started is because in Mexico, mostly, the majority of the members of the educational system are women. And we are, by the way, not taking the decisions for the educational system. So we're kind of practically removed away, so the decisions are made by men. And so this amazing group of women, which I've mentioned them, I put their faces and their names, started to thinking about how we can just get together and how we can design an agenda for advocating for girls in education, women in education, and the rise of women in education in Mexico. So I just want to like bring this short quote from Margaret Reed, who said like a way you wouldn't imagine how a small group of people how can change the world. So it started in 2019. But then it happens that we are aligned. I think it's just the same as every network to the SDG goals. I think that we are advocating and doing our best to add a little bit of effort to the quality and education goal and to the gender equality. And also, like, we are really aware of what is happening in terms of the information that World Economic Forum has also addressed of the global gender gap. We all know that, and Barbara, you're an amazing advocate of women in education and women in tech. So I think that we are all aware of what is happening here. And in Mexico, it is not, I mean, it is super present, the idea of this gender gap. So just to give you an idea before moving to the next slide, I'm always saying that the amount of girls out of school in the world is the same size of the whole country in Mexico, which means imagine Mexico, like this country that you will find in the map, full only with girls out of school. So that's the size of the problem and the challenge that we have in front of us. And obviously, in Mexico, we are not left behind in terms of the amount of the million girls out of school. So what is MUPOREV? This is how we name it. It is a network of women first. It is a space where we create dialogue, collaboration, and action. It is super important that we think about moving forward in terms of suggesting ideas for the agenda, for public policies, for programs, or just filling the gaps that we have been facing all over in Mexico for the last almost 1 year. We empower women, which means we empower within the network, but we're also like bringing advices, recommendations, as you will see in the next slide, to other women, practically teachers that are in the educational system. And a very important fact is that we are not affiliated to any political parties, movements, or institutions. We are just bring a lot of partnerships. So this is what we have, what is MUPOREV in like a very short introduction. So we are now 150 members, and it's a very horizontal network. You will find women that have been very active in education. They have a lot of expertise, former officials, just women just finishing their undergraduate programs, or like very senior women that have been in the educational system working for more than 35, 40 years. So it's like a group of very diverse women, all passionate about education, all with different expertises. I mean, tech, science, math, social emotional learning, by the way, and we have a lot of experience. So we are all in there right now. Until now, we have 150 members. It's all about experience and passion about education. The key areas that we are going through is obviously advocacy. We have a huge area of advocacy, and we deploy statements for the decision makers to be aware of certain topics. We obviously support a lot of entrepreneurs in terms of skills, and a lot of very good startups that many of these women are just developing, events, projects, and a lot of many things are happening. So there's a lot of information that we have been going through. We have done a huge amount of things. The pandemic has shown us the gap that the teachers needed to like be more supported. So it started with this with defunding the rights of education of women, but we have developed an educational backpack, if I want to use that word, which is a lot of resources created for the teachers so they can just get in and find resources for complementing their online classes or the distance classes. We have developed policy briefs. We have delivered also educational guidelines for COVID. And also we have a very important way of advocacy, which is we have a blog, and every week it just deploys in a lot of national newspapers. The most important thing in terms of advocacy is that we have a current campaign. We are really thinking about, we need to take girls back into education. And I think, Barbara, you will love what we're doing. We are doing everything through TikTok, and we have found the importance of peer messages and peer communication. So we're just asking girls, young leaders, to be part of this campaign, to convince other young women from their own age, like from the same age, to come back to school and like remind them how important it is to stay in school. So it is the TikTok, and because it was just like the amazing platform that we found, in which a lot of girls are in it. So we are just thinking about suggesting ideas, recommendations, and a lot of suggestions between them. So we have until now a reach of all the campaign that we have done for Mexico, and we're just growing into Ibero-America, which includes Spain and Portugal also, and also Latin American countries. And we have reached until now 2 million people. So it is the things that we're doing, a lot of advocacy, but we're right now like doing our best to keep girls in school or take them back to school. So I think I will stop there, Barbara. So, and thanks a lot for being part of asking me for being part of this panel. And thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And that's fascinating. And congratulations on all the great work you've done and seeing the reach of your work through the various channels. That's amazing. And what an important and incredible cause. So super appreciative of the work you've been doing. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jigyasa.
Hi, everyone. I am Jigyasa, and I'm from a nonprofit called Slam Out Loud in India. I think before I begin, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that many countries in the world, and especially India, are going through a really hard time right now. And while it is important that all of our efforts and energy are directed towards COVID relief in the short term, I'm also grateful that we are creating spaces where we can talk about the long term as well, about how the world we will land into in the aftermath of COVID will need more spaces for children to be able to express, to have healthy socio-emotional learning. And that's why thank you, Karanga Knowledge Hook, Salzburg Global Seminar, and Barbara and Patricia and Jennifer for being here today and creating this space to talk about something that's really, really important in the context that we're in. All right, so like I told you, I'm from a nonprofit called Slam Out Loud, and something that I deeply believe is that our children, no matter where they come from, should get a fundamental opportunity of finding their own voice, that our dreams for them should not be restricted to either academics or at best employment, and not based from the opportunities that they're born into. So I have a question for all of you, and I would love if we can have different people respond in the chat. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think school or education systems create space for children's voice? Feel free to, so 1 means very little or 0 means not at all, and 10 means they absolutely create that space for children's voice. So I would love for all of us to use the chat and give a score out on what that number looks like. So I can see a lot of 4s and 3s and 4s, 2, especially through COVID. Yeah, somebody said 5, 2, 4. So we're seeing the number, like the maximum number reaching here is 5. And clearly the jury out here is that we don't create spaces for children's voice. The lines that you see on this screen are some things that our children at Slam Out Loud have written. And they've written this because at Slam Out Loud, we use art forms like poetry, theater, storytelling, and visual arts. And the idea is to use the transformational power of the arts to help children find their own voice through creative expression. How do we do this? Is we create resources and we work with artists who directly work with children to support children in building social emotional learning through the arts. And again, the idea is for children to have their own powerful voice, have their own ideas that empower them to change not only the lives of others around them, but also their own lives. So coming to social emotional learning and gender equity, I've been thinking a lot about how whenever I think of marginalized groups, I often think about groups that have raised a rebellion for themselves. And then I think about children. And then I think about girl children. And I think about how we often don't see them as marginalized because they've not been able to raise that rebellion. However, when I see children like Supriya being able to speak their truth to power, I think about how does the support for agency and creative expression of voices that are less represented lead to gender equity? And with that question in mind, I would love to invite all of us to see a small poem that Supriya has written and performed herself. Supriya is a 14-year-old from Slam Out Loud, comes from a low-income community in Delhi, and is a fantastic spoken word poet and has the agency to talk about what she thinks is important for her. As we see this video, keep the question that I've just asked in your mind. And whenever you resonate with something, maybe a line, maybe if a thought, idea, or question pops up into your head, feel free to make this as interactive as you'd like. So use the chat and keep sharing what you think. And let's watch this video together.
It is not easy. It's not easy to look into the mirror and examine my own body to know if I'm tall enough to make an eye contact with the world and tell them that I am not different. To examine if I'm fair enough to not be suggested a fairness cream. It is not easy. It is not easy to use ignorance as earplugs to escape all the names you call me. It is not easy to see myself through the eyes of others and decide that my body is all that matters. But now is the time. Now is the time to tell you that you can label me according to your judgments, tie tags with my name as if I'm not a human but a shirt you've made with a size, color, and quality that you can rate. Because I am not afraid of your judgments, tags, and labels and comments unbearable as I know. I know you don't know me enough to understand my story, feel my emotions, or put yourself in my shoes and imagine why I am the way I show myself to be. You have all the media to keep defining, advertising, recommending, and selling your fake highlighted beauty packed in beauty products to make fair, lovely, and superior, dark, ugly, and inferior. You have all the choices to turn your face away from my dark skin and label me as not beautiful. To keep degrading my confidence with all the advices to get a spotless skin. Because you have never known how I have been wearing all my marks, all my scars like an armor to fight for a community that will accept my dark skin. You have never read or heard my poems woven with all the beauty I see in the world, all the beauty my heart carries, all the beauty that keeps kindness and love alive in me, and all the stories that express my voice and the real me. You are always free to make fun of my shortness, have pride in your tallness, and laugh if I'm too fat or too skinny, and live your moments of happiness. Because you have never looked into my eyes that dream fearlessly to bring a change in the world, in the society. You have never measured the distance I have walked tirelessly to earn a place for my talents, hard work, dreams, desires by fighting a battle with all the judgments, tags, and labels. You can find me in bits and pieces in all those you call Bihari as a token of insult, disrespect, and inferiority because you are still rooted within your own daily rituals of bracketing my identity. You haven't yet learned what is oneness and unity, have not yet developed the love to accept people with their realities. You are all free to make a choice to like or dislike me, love me, or even hate me. Because I think my body, heart, and soul needs enough love from no one but me. Every part of me needs freedom from hatred for myself and judgments from me. I will be happy. I will smile only when I will start to accept myself and stop waiting for others to accept me. You can always judge me because I am no more going to use the methods of sedimentation and filtration to let my identity settle deep inside my cells. I am no more going to sieve my words like my daily tea and separate them into useful to please and non-useful ones that I'll cut by my teeth, gulp down my throat, and never set them free. I am going to be myself, live my life, and stop building mirrors in everyone I meet and accept the identity, the reflections they show me. So you are most welcome with your tags and labels to judge me.
यहाँ सब चीजों का मोल भाव होता है.
My identity can't be defined by my color or the way I look.
So the question that I have for each one of you is, how do you think providing a space for children's identity and voice leads to gender equality? And if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to keep sharing that in the chat, because watching Supriya and watching children like Supriya and girls like Supriya own their truth and speak it in the most powerful ways has given me some ideas about it, but I would love to hear from all of you. How we do what we do at Slam Out Loud is through 3 programs. The first is, of course, a fellowship program in which we work with the same children for about 5 years, placing an artist in the classroom that works with the children through these different art forms and helps build social-emotional learning and their voice through the years that we work with them. Our second program enables teachers to be able to bring art into their classrooms. So we support them through our resources, videos, lesson plans, guidelines, so that even if they don't have the artistic abilities, they're able to use our resources to bring in more art and expression into their classroom. And our focus program at the moment, which has been Arts for All in response to COVID, is all about how might we use art for well-being of children, especially children during lockdown, and being in spaces where they're digitally disconnected. How might we reach out to children at different levels? So we create physical booklets that allow children to have creative outcomes during this period, have outcomes concerned with mindfulness and making meaning of the time that they're going through. Similarly, we use low-tech platforms like WhatsApp and IVRS, which allow children even having low internet bandwidths to access artistic activities and through that build social-emotional learning, have space for creative outcomes during this. And our project, which is Arts for All in response to COVID, is currently reaching out to about 4.7 million children across 19 countries globally, which means that countries and teachers and educators and institutions across the world are realizing that SEL and children's expression and voice is so crucial, especially at a time like this. These are just some numbers on how we've expanded our program. So while our fellowship is a program which is very in-depth, programmatic, not created for scale, Arts for All, or the program that allows us to use our resources and spread them and seed in children the path to being creative, that's a program that we've been able to scale across the world. And then we also have something in the middle where we support and train teachers to bring art into their own classrooms. So here are some resources for you. We have DIY resources that allow children to play with art forms like visual arts, painting, storytelling, theater, and poetry, and learn how they might express themselves through that. At the same time, we also have things like an activity booklet, which you can print and distribute to children. These are all activities based on art, SEL, mindfulness, expressing yourself. And we have certain resources that also allow children to understand gender and environment through art. And for that, you can reach out to me at jigyasa@slamoutloud.org. If you want to know more, here's where you can find us. And thank you for listening to me. And thank you for connecting with Supriya's poem. I will try to answer all questions or comments in the chat, but if I'm not able to, do reach out to me on email. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jigyasa. That was incredibly powerful to see the work come through in the poem, in the work that you've been doing with children. So one of the key questions we wanted to explore as part of the discussion is the role of female educator networks. And, I'd be curious to hear from either one of you what the role of the female educator networks has been in the work that you've been doing respectively.
I can jump very quickly, Barbara. Is that okay, Jigyasa? I think that in the case of Mupored and the network that I'm representing today, it is there was something happening, Barbara and Jigyasa, in terms of no one was talking to the teachers, the women leaders, the educators. So what we found is the need to let's bring something and let's develop ideas, projects, pedagogical suggestions. And it all started with the march, with this worldwide movement in terms of March the 8th. So it was how to advocate in terms of rights to women and whatever. And what happened to us was the teachers, which were, by the way, still some days before the pandemic and the school closures, they were asking us, I do not know what to explain, to my kids, to my students, in terms of why are we just stopping everyone and not attending classes and not attending schools. So it began with this consciousness of, okay, something around women movement and worldwide movement is happening, and we as teachers do not know how to express and to explain our students in that. So I think that was a starting point when we think about women networks, which is what is the real thing that we're fighting for and that we're really advocating for. So you can find this place where rights to education is a very important aspect, but also to bring awareness in the role that women have, not only in terms of in school, but in home. And that's something that we have been trying to put on the agenda, social agenda, by the way, not a public agenda, but a social agenda. So I will just my quick reaction on your question, Barbara.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And Jigyasa, in the context of the work that you've been doing, I think we've just all witnessed the power of art and expression come through in that poem. And how have you sort of seen the role of female educator networks sort of intersect with the work that you've been doing in bringing art and expression into the learning journey in extremely powerful ways?
Yeah, I think often, especially for girls and for women, not having enough role models can be a really, really real problem. And once female educator networks are probably the ones who empathize the most with not having enough role models to look up to, who've sort of been pushing their voice or their agency. So I think when girls in classrooms are able to see those female educators, see those networks and see the power that they bear, see them accepting themselves and accepting and operating with a sense of agency, I think that is almost like passing a baton to the next generation, almost like saying, I did this and so can you. And that is very powerful and very real as well.
Yeah. And just staying with you, Jigyasa, for a second, what are your thoughts on, the timing of some of this, especially in the context of the pandemic, how some of these things have sort of come together? And I'd just love to get your thoughts on how you see these dynamics work out, because obviously social emotional learning, the need and importance of female role models, these are not new necessarily, but what have you seen, especially during the last 15 months, in sort of these things coming together?
Yeah. Whenever we think of a pandemic or whenever we think of any disaster, the effects of anything negative that happens in the world are borne multiple times over by people who are marginalized. And women and female networks are some of the most marginalized people in the world. So some of the after effects of the pandemic that are very, very clearly visible are things like when, let's say, families that have been pushed into extreme poverty because of the pandemic, when they have to choose who they can send to, let's say, a government school and who they need to send to in a private school, they will choose to send the boy in their families to a better school and send the girls, or drive the girl out of education. And that has been very, very real. We've seen cases of child marriage increase, especially for girls. We've seen cases of domestic violence happening for children at home. So the impact of a disaster that leads so many people into poverty is much higher on women. And so having these conversations about how important it is for us to focus on both female educator networks and have a gender focus when we're thinking about education, and secondly, creating space for social emotional learning. We don't want to get into a scenario where after, let's say, the pandemic is over and children go back to school, we're telling them, now let's do some extra classes because you need to catch up, or now let's do more of academics because you've lost a year. While this might be a time to get children to resolve everything that they've felt and reflect on what has this year looked like for them, I hope that we take time as educators to really, really question ourselves and what we will do once this is over. Otherwise, we would have failed. This is a pause, and if we don't change after this, it'll be such a shame.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point to say. How are we, even as we're getting out of the pandemic and back into the classrooms, how are we making sure that we're not just going back to something, but really taking those reflections and learnings, and also giving the students an opportunity to sort of process and think and learn from all of those experiences that they've had. Patricia, looking at your work that you've done in Mexico, how has the Female Educator Network accelerated and helped to move the topic of social emotional learning to the forefront of teaching and learning? And what is some of the impact that you've seen, especially on girls' education?
Thanks a lot, Barbara. I think it's a very important question, and I might link my answer from what just Jigyasa mentioned. I think, I mean, there's a couple of tracks that we're working on, right? And yeah, you wouldn't imagine about how many conversations we have in the network about the importance of also fulfilling and going through within the proper network. I mean, we're 150 women, and we're like super passionate about just doing something, action, super hands-on. But we all need to find a time for ourselves in terms of going through the process of well-being, right? So that track is led by a group of, by the way, other members of the Salzburg Global Seminar, Atentamente, Daniela Laura and Emiliana Rodriguez, which they have been trying to help the proper members of the network to think about more about well-being, and then how we are just building this network forward. So that's an important thing, because sometimes we forget how important it is to work between and within us. And on the other hand, obviously there's a very important aspect and a working group in the network that is many other institutions, universities, and I think that's a very important thing to bring into the conversation, which is the role in which universities can help to think and to develop and to more consciousness about the role of SEL in the student's life, and obviously in the decision-making processes. So, so the way we have decided to move forward the topic in the network is by seminars, by just bringing a lot of partnerships with universities and civil organizations. And we have many people that have gather those seminars in terms of, okay, yeah, I've never thought about social emotional learning before getting into math or into sciences or into any other like subject and concrete curriculum aspect. So, and the thing that I want to add is, and that's where I see the super potential of Jigyasa and the women in Mexico and the network women in Mexico, is we had a survey of around 26,000 students from 14 to 16 years old, and it hasn't been released, but we did that survey for 14 states, which is half of the population in Mexico. And the women, the girls, just said to us, we are bored, we don't have hope, my learning outcomes will be worse, even worse before the pandemic. So there's something that they're saying to us, but there's also something that they're suggesting to us. We all women from these ages find ourselves more active in social networks. So I think that just using the power of tech plus SEL, like knowing how they are feeling, is a very important aspect, because I think art is a very great vehicle to just move forward the conversation. So it is not also, Barbara, just to finish my part in terms of what we do within the network, what we develop in terms of working groups and conversations with other decision makers and bring other partners into the conversation, but also what we are watching. They're inactive, and that's why we're thinking about the campaigns more into like peer campaigns and just talking between them and raise awareness on how they can participate or be more active daily in their social lives.
Yeah, that resonates super well. And I'm just going to give you a quick follow-up question there as well before I go back to Jigyasa. So in that context and that sort of power of those networks, what is the advice that you would have for senior education leaders on the role of these networks and how they can be leveraged more strongly as we move forward and in their role, especially in social emotional learning?
My answer will be like something that we have been saying a lot is that the educational agenda is not owned by the institutions, it's owned by the society. And we have to be much more active in terms of what we're doing, the messages that we're sending. And as long as we all work together, it's going to be faster and easier to get and to reach at least girls that are out of school or that are about to dropping out of school or that just are interested in another thing. So the first thing is that, I mean, the educational agenda is a social agenda. Yeah. And the second thing is that we have been just saying is, please do not prioritize the content of the curriculum if you feel that teachers or the students are not ready to get into the content. So please prioritize the social emotional learning agenda. So how are they? How they feel? What has happened in their houses as they were like out of school? And that's also part of the information that we have, Barbara, in terms of a lot of these students have seen much more violence in their household. Like there's something that has happened. So we are just suggesting to think more about prior agenda in terms of social emotional learning, and then just get into content. I think that we have amazing teachers and they're gonna like just balance the learning outcomes that we have lost. But we need to find, there's something that we have been saying. I mean, no one can learn if they feel scared, left out, right, left behind. So that's the thing that we're just saying.
Yeah. No, that's such a critical reminder as we sort of come to the end of the current school year and then think about what's ahead in the next school year. So Jigyasa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of as you work with your communities and the advice you would give to education leaders as we're thinking about what the next school year will bring and how to construct that school year and how to make sure that the students get off to a really good start.
Yeah, I think I'm in complete agreement with Patricia also when she talks about how like the educational agenda is the social agenda. One is we will need all stakeholders on board. And we will need these stakeholders to have their ears very, very close to the ground, which is really listen to children and create space for their voice. What is it that they need at this point of time? So keeping our ears and eyes open to the needs of our children is the first one. And the second is absolutely what also Daniel has mentioned in the comments, which is about how creating space for children to be able to resolve what they've gone through the year, creating safe spaces for relationship buildings. Like, these will be the spaces that will eventually lead to closing the gap. And we know there would have been a gap that has been created in these years, but prioritizing children's mental well-being, emotional well-being over academics at this point of time will be needed for our children to be able to study in places that they feel loved, cared for, and respected in, and also places that can bring them joy. Yeah.
That's super powerful. And, it's that, sort of conscious effort to say, yes, there has been some loss on the academic side, and I think nobody's debating that, but to really think first about what actually enables students and children to really be back in learning and embrace learning and bring their full confidence to learning again in their own voices, and prioritizing that in how we think about the path forward, and giving them their voices and their agency and their well-being. And I love, Patricia, your comment on the educational agenda is a societal agenda, and it involves all the stakeholders and for really moving forward. And I know Jennifer has been monitoring the chat and probably has some additional questions for us.
Yeah, Barbara, there's been some really interesting comments, and really appreciating the comments that the three of you are making. Danielle talks about the need to rebuild relationships rather than focus on gap narrowing, and you've certainly started off with that. But I thought Patricia and Jigyasa, both of you talked about this idea of scalability, because of course everyone on this call knows that every one of us has a role to play, but how do we get it scaled out? Patricia, you kind of started down that peer campaign, and Jigyasa, just the reach that you have. Tell us a little bit more the details of how that happens.
I think I can share just because I'm already unmuted. So I think one of my biggest learnings from the last year has been equating scale to partnerships. Often organizations are attached or people are attached to the idea of their organizations growing bigger, their operations growing bigger. But there is a possibility to multiply impact if we allow the idea to scale rather than the organization to scale. And ideas can scale when people who believe in similar things can come together and collaborate. And hence, I would say that collaboration or partnership is the short way to scale. As long as there are, of course, common grounds, there are norms established about how those relationships will look like. But for us, how scaling has happened is getting on board other partners who might believe in the same things that we believe in, but do not have the capacity to implement those things. And us like kind of closing that gap, providing them support and being able to do that has allowed us to scale our work in a year when our funding was cut down, in a year when expanding physically to a new region was not possible, and in a year that brought 100 other challenges with it. And of course, this lesson that scale is equal to partnerships.
And just maybe to add on what Jigyasa said, I would just say like maybe two things. I mean, I think that the pandemic has shown us the power of networks. So you wouldn't imagine how has been like just this women network in education, and then like someone else like in EdLatam Alliance, which by the way, Fernando is here connected, I saw in the participants, like all about tech in education. And then suddenly happens to be like this network of environment in education. So it is like the power of networks is most visible than ever. Like it is, like we just have conversation with Wise this morning and say like how we just can build together, because yeah, there's something happening in terms of we are a lot of more people that are aware of the educational crisis than we thought. And I just want to say like this is the moment of networking, and we need to refine the role of what is networking and how to be more productive and how we get a win-win perspective. So I think that's the pandemic that just exploded, right? And the other thing is when we thought then about, yeah, I mean, we know how to write policy briefs. I mean, we are powerful women of education, like we know how to do programs and policy, but we are not bringing the voices of the younger generations. So the peer campaign it was a way in which, by the way, Sonia and Anna, who are leading this effort from the network, they just thought like, we need to get into the platforms in which they are. It is like blogs, podcasts, like, and we have to move out of our comfort zone as we, maybe senior leaders, are used to, and we have to start listening to the needs of them. So the peer campaign is just like a very small spot that we thought is a great opportunity to talk to them. And when we opened that window, it was impressive, the reaction that we have. And I think, I mean, we've never thought about using art. I have to be very honest. That's why I think Jigyasa work is amazing. But they know they have a safe space where they can say, I'm feeling lonely. I don't know what to do. I don't know to whom I should approach. But that's the main window. Now, how we can canalize that energy, and I mean, arts is an amazing platform, but it's just the beginning, Jen, of opening the window for them, for the younger voices, for the younger generations, and let them be aware that they're going to be like the future decision makers after the pandemic, and that we need their agency. I will just say that to finish my reaction in that question.
And we used to try to funnel people into kind of a winning network where we were trying to funnel all the conversations into one place. And I think that's something that we've really learned. We're not trying to get one conversation happening. We're trying to get multiple conversations happening globally, multi-generational. It's everyone having those conversations so that we'll have a difference for kids. Barbara, I've got one question coming from Ralph. And Microsoft Education has done some amazing work on, future skills and future ready and SEL. And there's a great Facebook group, SEL and Edu, that has lots of participants. He talks about your more recent paper, The Class of COVID, and the fact that giving students the ability to share their feelings actually helps generate brain plasticity. Tell us just a couple of seconds about what that research is saying.
Yes, for sure. So as you know, this whole area of social emotional learning and student well-being and where and how it also intersects with technology has been a key priority for us, especially as we move through the pandemic, and with the notion of what can we learn from others. And so over the course of the last couple of months, we've worked with sociologists, neuroscientists, cognitive psychologists, and really a broad swath of experts across various disciplines to better understand the impact of the pandemic on student learning and student well-being, and what those intersections are. And so that's a new paper that we've actually just published together with Harvard Business Review Analytical Services. And so we'd be more than happy to make sure people have access to that and share in that learning on how we can give, especially the younger generation. And there's been many articles written on how especially the student population and the younger generation haven't had sufficient of a voice in how to navigate through the pandemic. And so how can we take all of those learnings to give that voice and that agency to the students and really empower them and put them at the center of the conversation as we move forward?
That's great. And maybe Ralph, if you can put a link to that, we've got people asking to get access to that paper. It's great to be able to share resources right here on the session. We're getting really close to winding up, and I'm going to hand it over to Barbara to make some final comments and with the panelists.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thank you, Jennifer, for hosting this wonderful series. And again, power to the network and including more people in the conversation, and just the ability to see how Jigyasa is working with communities through arts in India, how Patricia has built this network of female education leaders in Mexico, and how these conversations intersect and come together all across the world is incredibly powerful, because that's how we will all make education better and give more opportunities to more learners as we move forward, and especially girls in education. I would love to give Jigyasa and Patricia maybe just a minute each for some final thoughts.
I think I've shared most of my thoughts through the course of a conversation because of the wonderful questions you asked. But I think if I had to add anything in the end, it would be about reprioritizing. It would be about how we've been doing education until now. And we've been given this pause to be intentional. We've been given this pause to reimagine what we can do differently and what will enable our children to really have a voice. What we will do next will just show whether we've learned or not.
Thank you, Jigyasa. Patricia, any final comments from your end?
Yeah, I was just thinking of what to say also. And I think that, I mean, there's a lot of work that we have, that we are all doing, right? And something that we have to be grateful is how much the educational systems have taught us and how much we have learned from them. So I think that a very good way to thank all the things that we are and what we are is just to give back some of our time to any network that you feel that you can just join in your country or in your place, or even think about building a network and bring your friends and like try to be aware of what is happening. We need to be more aware of the huge crisis that education is going to face for the next years. And I think, I mean, everyone is welcome in the network, Women in Education in Mexico. It's all Spanish, but everyone is super welcome to build partnerships. But I think that we need small spots all over the world doing something for the educational systems, and also for all the people that are out of the system. So I'll just think about, just join, build, reflect, and let's just slam out loud, by the way, the importance of education.
That is so amazing. And we were very purposeful when we were putting this session together on female educator networks. We wanted to demonstrate that these work in societies like the US, they work throughout all of Latin America, they work throughout India. They look differently, but the impact is incredible. And we know we have lots of girls around the world that need those wonderful role models that all three of you are. So thanks to all three of you. A quick comment just before we sign off. Here is where you can access knowledgehook.com/leadership. You're welcome to share this link with anyone. It is free resources for leaders in education. And we have a session coming up on May the 26th. And it is on teacher inquiry and knowledge building. And we have Helen Timperley, who is probably the most renowned academic for research in that particular area, and Tara Taylor-Jorgensen from the Ministry of Education in New Zealand. So we're going to take a walk down under and see what things are looking like in New Zealand, and welcome to all of you to join us. So thank you again, Patty, Jigyasa, and Barbara, and to all the participants. It's been a great session. I feel inspired once again. Thank you so much.